Welcome to the show. Wayne from Productive Not Busy is here with us tonight, and I'm your host, Cam. Welcome, Wayne.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Anytime. And once again, we're just doing kind of a overview of just two giant, important, and iconic bands. We got Led Zeppelin and we got Van Halen. And it's kind of a scattershot narrative on just how they're both very key influences on the genre.
Mm-hmm.
For those who didn't know, Led Zeppelin started in the 70s, known for being very innovative, mixing in world music, funk, country, and synthesizers. They were part of the Yardbirds, and already a big, giant, pioneering British band. And Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck, Robert Plant, three giant names from there. They just started touring with the US, and you can name several of their different, hits that include.
Well, you've got Kashmir and Immigrant Song and
Right.
Stairway to Heaven and Rock and Roll and all those.
Fool in the Rain, Communication Breakdown, Heartbreaker, Going to California, Ramble On. I'm
correct.
Over the Hills and Far Away, Black Dog. A Whole Lot of Love was another one, and Dazed and Confused and Misty Mountain Hop. Yeah, I mean, I always grouped often them and Van Halen together because I just knew that they were just very natural storytellers in a way with their very dense British rock style. So for those who want to know about Van Halen, of course, that was an American band, but just as influential in the 70s. And big names involved: David Lee Roth, Eddie Van Halen, Sammy Hagar, and they were influential in that they also kind of just took a while. And near the end of 1978, they had an explosive debut. And Eddie was also the son of a Dutch band leader, and so he moved from the Netherlands to Pasadena, California. Just so wild how they went from being a wedding band to a professional band.
Well, they did. They had a lot of noise around them, so because they started in '72, right? '74 they hooked up with Roth, and in '78 they released their debut.
That's what it was. Yeah.
And that. You had another key factor there, which is another iconic band from that area, which was Kiss, because Gene Simmons was actually the one that took them and recorded their first demo.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm. And that stuff you can actually find. Gene Simmons still has some of the master recordings from those sessions, and he's released some of them. You can find them on YouTube and Google.
Yeah.
From way back in the day.
Way back in the day, some deep cuts. They've definitely re-released a bunch of them. Van Halen, much like my father often got teased for kind of liking all eras of the Doobie Brothers, when a lot of fans were kind of opinionated on different eras, different, change of hands. I pretty much liked all of Van Halen. I just always just grew up with all eras in the 2000s. So I liked everything from Unchained, Can't Stop Lovin', Drop Dead Legs, Without You, Mean Streets, Take Your Whiskey Home, and Black and Blue, and It's About Time, and Tattoo. I just had, obviously there's Panama, Running with the Devil, Right Now, and One I Want, and Dream Is Over. But I can name endless hits that I like by him, but so many others were just just hate certain eras of Van Halen, especially David Lee Roth era gets criticized a lot.
So I like him. So I was blessed. So I was born in 1969, and my mom and dad were actually traveling musicians. My dad was an amazing guitar player, session guy. So I grew up around people. I actually grew up with the folks like the Allman Brothers,
Nice.
Grinder Switch, Amazing Rhythm Aces. My dad actually grew up in Beaumont, Texas, and his ninth grade class was himself, the Johnny and Edgar Winter, Um, there was, a lot of opportunity for me to be ingrained in music, which I ultimately ended up in a band that got signed early in the late '80s, early '90s. Didn't quite hit the stratospheric level, but we had a good run of it. Toured with Motley Crue and Poison and Cinderella and Pastor Pussycat and those bands. So for me, when you're talking about what you like in those bands, the cool thing about the mesh up between, the connection between Zeppelin and Van Halen is that, the Yardbirds started in '68, right? Which had Jimmy Page and Eric Clapton. So it kind of set the tone for that Britishy, bluesish, melodic, right? If you think about it, every Led Zeppelin song that you mention, you can actually hum that, like you almost hear it in your head when you name the song.
It's so true. It is very natural.
Right. And if you think about it, Van Halen's the same way, right? If you say Unchained, right, I automatically hear that chugging beginning guitar, right? Or
Zeppelin were kind of like ELO.
Zeppelin, and Zeppelin
also
took the songwriting to the next level.
Yeah.
Right. Their songwriting is what took them to another level, which was
right. And we remember the melodies.
The melodies and the actual content of the songs were very, like, we're not talking bubblegum music. We're talking, novelistic type lyrics. And it's really interesting how that works. So that family tree of how that trickles down, because really, honestly, the Yardbirds were pretty much what started it, right? And then the guitar-driven type music, rock music or blues rock, whatever you want to call it, and then you start trickling down. That produced, Van Halen and Jimi Hendrix and AC/DC, and you think about it, that DNA and that strand there is huge. But Zeppelin and Van Halen are really, there's not too many people that don't have a favorite song from one of those two bands. I don't care what kind of music you like.
Yeah. It does sadden me when every once in a while I will see just occasional overrated. I was even asking other people to be on here, and I even got a few who are just like, I can do Van Halen or I can do Led Zeppelin. I can't do the other. I'm like, really? Because to me, that this is like peanut butter and jelly. Like it does all mash together to one juicy sandwich. So I'm just like, okay,
and there's a slight difference between your peanut butters, right? You're either a Skippy guy or a Jif guy, right? And they're both peanut butter, but they all got their own little thing that you like about them that you prefer over the other, but you'll take the other one if you had to, right?
Oh, totally. Beggars can't always be choosers, but yeah, if you could choose, you gotta probably go with the full.
Right. So that and the cool thing about Zeppelin and Van Halen too is that, me being a musician, I was a lead guitar player. My dad was a lead guitar player, so I was exposed a lot to that instrument. And if you think about it, those two folks are the epitome of what. If you could dream up being a guitar player, that's what you either wanted to be, Eddie Van Halen, or you wanted to be Jimmy Page. A lot of people say, "Oh, Jeff Beck." Well, Jeff Beck is kind of like sardines, right? it really good to some people and just not their thing for other people, right? I mean, it's just not my thing. So, not that he isn't good, but that's what was neat about that, and it's lasting. So, I was born in '69, and here we are in 2022. And the funny thing about those two bands is that you still hear on a regular basis their songs on terrestrial radio every day.
Right. and just nonstop.
Right. And the thing about that, so what that means is now you've got timeless. It's timeless music, which means it's going to be here when my grandkids are listening to the radio. 50 years from now, it'll still be played. It'll never go out of style because it's relatable to everybody, which is really cool. It's not your folky rock stuff that some people like it, some people don't, or it's time based or era based or whatever. That music is fun party music, right? I mean, I've been at weddings for people in their 50s that played a Van Halen song or a Led Zeppelin song. I've been to weddings where people in their late teens, early 20s that played a Van Halen song or a Led Zeppelin song. So it's timeless, and that's what's so cool about it.
Right. And it is definitely a summary of that era, as well as we're beyond the experimentation. Now we're trying out so many different types of, I almost kind of call it time warping music, if that makes sense. We are literally just expanding the music horizon. Everyone's making music that, critics probably weren't the biggest fans of at the time, but everyone was listening to. Garage bands were listening to. Junior high and high schoolers were listening to. Adults are listening to. Great music does take evolution of digestion after a while, and they were good in that they basically just they were also kind of critic free. They didn't care what anyone thought of them. They were just wanted to play what was in their soul, what was in their mind, that had to expand from the music sheet to the record. And like you say, it is interesting to seeing how I do like your food analogies and metaphors, because it's definitely does kind of, we did kind of just all eat it up, just like any kind of favorite food.
Absolutely. And it was it's a guilty pleasure. It's junk food, right? And you'll consume all of it you can, even if it's too loud or whatever. And the cool thing about it is, if you think about it, the like Van Halen, for instance, there was what was it, a different kind of truth. I think it was in 2012. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's it. A different kind of truth was the album they did that had Tattoo on it, and a couple other songs. All of those songs, I think 80% of the songs on that album in 2012 were stuff that Wolfgang dug out of a box from 1978, 79, and 80, and they recorded.
Totally.
So if you think about it, that's pretty cool. That just goes to show you they were writing timeless music. They didn't know it at the time. They were writing what felt good and what sounded good. They weren't like today's music is written to a formula. I'm a musician, so
right. You must go by the book.
Right. Right. You're going by the book, or the Taylor Swift model, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It sells millions of records, but it sounds like everything else out there. Whereas Unchained, or any of those songs off of Unlawful Cardinal Knowledge, or OU182 even, or Diver Down. I mean, those are mostly cover songs, but 5150 and Fair Warning, nothing sounds like that. You don't mistake that for anybody. You don't mistake that. And Zeppelin was exactly the same way. From the first 2 or 3 chords of a Zeppelin song, there's absolutely zero mistake, right, on who
they couldn't afford to. Yeah.
Right. I mean, and that's the thing, there was one little blip in time there when I was playing. We were actually on tour with Motley Crue and Poison at the time as an opening act. And we ran across a band called Kingdom Come. I don't know if you remember them or not. There was a band called Kingdom Come.
Before my time.
And they got what Greta Van Fleet's getting now. Greta Van Fleet just took the horns and just went with it, because that's what they really play. They're not making up anything. That's their jam. That's their DNA musically. So they just happen to sound like Zeppelin because that's what they like.
Nice.
But there was a band called Kingdom Come that literally would take Zeppelin songs and basically like rearrange them and make them their own, and it sounded just like Zeppelin. So other than that one little blip in time there, when you play a Zeppelin song or put any Van Halen song in, there is not a chance that you put any Van Halen song on your radio or on your iPod or whatever and mistake it for somebody else, which is not too many bands out there that you could say that. I mean, you could put a Allman Brothers song on and somebody could think it's Leonard Skinner or vice versa. You know what I'm saying? But the distinct ring that those two bands brought to the table that's why they're going to be timeless and they'll be there forever.
I could not have said it better, especially with, like you say, I mean, that they have their identity, they have their signature style. So it's not a matter of, I'm, not like nowadays, how many pop singers and hard rock bands can you say that we basically mix up with the other? It's just such an oversaturated market now. So
absolutely. And that's why, if you think about it, let's just say, I mean, it's been all over the news that Alex Van Halen's been trying to put a deal together to do something to kind of like as a tribute to his brother. Well, it can't be done.
Yeah.
I mean, you could you could get a bunch of musicians up there and jam, but you'll never, literally never put Van Halen back on stage again. Now they could plug and play singers because you know what? It's like the peanut butter analogy again. You had Jiffy with Roth and you had Skippy with Hagar, right? And I like both versions. I don't ever pit them either. There's not a reason not to like them both. Some people plant their flag with Roth and some plant their flag with Hagar. The music was totally different, not even remotely the same, but it was still Van Halen. And they owned it. You put the Hagar version of Van Halen on your iPod, and any song that plays, you know exactly that it's Van Halen, even though Roth is not in the band. Right?
Yeah.
You can't say that about too many bands.
No, really can't. And
right.
I haven't even listened to the 2022 Van Halen tribute. Or no, actually, that was a Led Zeppelin tribute band. But I heard some interesting stuff about that. But I mean, obviously, a year ago we lost Eddie Van Halen, and like you say, how do you replace that energy, that giant battery?
Yeah,
and
he was a personality. He was a personality. So you've got certain people in certain bands that are like that you just can't replace. And that's interesting because they did it with a singer, which is usually pretty hard to do, right? Skid Row's got a new singer. That's not Skid Row to me. That's just not Skid Row to me. He's good. He sounds amazing, but it's not Skid Row. When they plugged Roth into Van Halen, it was like, okay, let's roll, right? I mean, it was like new wheels and tires on an old car. It's the same old car, but it just got a little bit of a zing to it now, and so they were able to pull that off. Whereas you can't pull Eddie Van Halen out of that, regardless of his name, and plug another guitar player in there and that work.
Right. And isn't it funny how everyone knows so many different wacky behind the scenes stories of him? When he passed away, I told others about a funny story I had always heard about how he was working with some more modern heavy metal rock stars, and he was letting them use his studio, and the dude was just not putting up with anyone's bullshit. He was literally bringing out a gun and just saying, "You better get out of here, or I'm going to shoot you in self-defense." He was unhinged at times, and it's interesting how much of that energy kind of goes into his act. Did you see any of Sammy Hagar's rock and roll road trip show?
Oh yeah. I on Access TV, I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's such a shame that they canceled it due to COVID, but I was just blown away by how they were going to the actual locations of where so many bands perform, and they weren't just talking about just any location. There's like, hey, this is a legendary place where these artists perform because they got this loyal fan base that got created here this many years ago.
Yep.
But yeah,
absolutely.
I'm sure someone's going to want a reunion, but I don't know what you would do. You could maybe do like they've done with Michael Jackson or the Beatles. They could probably do a holographic band, but would probably be the extent. I don't think anyone else would want to legit.
Right, but that's just a revenue generating opportunity there.
Right.
That's the beauty about music, right? So you could also digitally remaster and remake a Picasso, but it's not a painting. There's no soul, there's no feeling to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Music is that way. I can play Van Halen songs. I can play Van Halen songs pretty much note for note, but it doesn't sound like Van Halen because there's more to it than the notes. There's more to it than the amp and the guitar, and that's what was really cool about that. And that's why when you watch people play Van Halen songs, it just isn't right. And it's not because the tuning's off. It's because it's not them playing it. There was a magic groove about it. So, I had the awesome opportunity of growing up and being around literally playing with, the Allman Brothers kids. I mean, I was there the day they did the Brothers and Sisters album cover.
What
right?
year?
The two,
If you don't mind me asking.
that was, what was that, 74, 75, 76, and 77.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, and it was, it was amazing because being a musician and growing up in that atmosphere, when they sat around and played just on the porch, there was magic. It wasn't just a bunch of dudes playing. There was something that happened when those people played, and that was the same as Van Halen. I moved from Denver, Colorado to Florida in 1983.
Ooh.
And I came and visited in 1980, some friends and relatives, and Van Halen played in a place called the Lakeland Civic Center in 1980, and it was literally magic. I mean, I was young. I was I was 11 years old, and it was absolute magic. It was, it's something 40 years later, or 40 something years later, I can still hear it in my head.
Right.
It was amazing. And Zeppelin too. I actually got to see Zeppelin live when I was 9.
Mm.
Yeah, I was 9 or 10 years old, and I got to see them live. And again, it was the recordings of that band don't do it justice.
Yeah.
They were just an
even seeing a concert on TV
right,
is different
yeah,
from an in-person concert.
Right. And it was different. It was absolute, like an avalanche of bombastic sound, because they didn't have all the effect pedals and all the digital amps that they've got now. This was a Les Paul with a Marshall turned up to 10.5 because he could get it there, and it was just nothing but it felt like you were getting hit with a fire hose of sound. It was just amazing and sounded good. It wasn't noise. It was amazing.
Yeah. I wish I could have been there, because like you say, it's something to be said for.
No, absolutely. And then again, watching, if you get a chance, there's some stuff on YouTube with Jimmy Page talking about how each one of the songs were written. And he actually breaks down exactly, almost minute by minute, like how Stairway to Heaven was, because they go back to the house, this castle that they recorded it in, and how the songs happened. Like, there was it wasn't a corporate Lego building block of songs. They sat down and it was just it just layered, and all of a sudden it just started happening. And then Plant would sit there on a step, or with his back up against the wall on the floor, and they would just play, and he would just write, and it would just come out this beautiful story. I mean, like Stairway to Heaven, good Lord, probably one of the top 5 songs ever written. And it happened with a bunch of young guys sitting around being magical because they could. That's extreme talent.
Yeah, they were grateful for the opportunity, and they had nothing else. This was it. Make it or break it.
Yeah, and it's, you're not writing 3-chord blues songs. They were writing like Beethoven type rock stuff. I mean, the Beethoven-esque type writing. I mean, it was calculated and extreme. I mean, that's a lost capsule in time of music that will probably, there's not people writing like that. There's a new band called, well, not new, they've been around 20-something years, called Blackberry Smoke. They're pretty darn close as far as their songwriting is concerned.
There's been some awesome cover bands, that is definitely for sure too. But yeah,
absolutely.
I can't think of any hard rock or metal band that isn't inspired by one of the two here.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. Especially if you start looking at all those other hard rock and heavy metal bands that go back and cover that era of music because they can't write it themselves.
They have to,
music. Yeah, they write good music for what they do, but they can't go back and they can't write that, because if you wrote a song in the Zeppelin style, it would sound like Zeppelin, and then you'd be, so basically those two bands created their own category, right? It's rock music, but Zeppelin is not your average rock band. That they are Zeppelin. So it's a real interesting dynamic that, that they were capable of doing what they did with what they had to do it with, because there wasn't a lot of technology.
Yeah, they had to.
Right. Because honestly, there's programs out there now that you can plug in chords to the computer and it'll arrange them for you in the ideal format. Right. I mean, that didn't exist back then. And listen to a song like Stairway to Heaven or the Immigrant Song or any of that. Who in the world would have ever thought to write something like that? That's what's cool about music, because music should be its own emotion in the human DNA, because it actually has the power to change your emotion, right? Your the way you feel. And when you listen to Van Halen and Led Zeppelin, that happens.
I'm sure they're having plenty of fever dreams and other moments of just, hey, how do I get that amount of anxiety and anger and what I'm feeling and sing about it? And
right,
like you say, it is just so unheard of. You can't reproduce it. You can't, even deciphering it is inevitably, nice try, but you're never gonna really know. Sure. It's kind of like deciphering a David Lynch movie. It's fun to go along for just the journey and know that, hey, it's
right.
Just enjoy it.
And right. And how you can know that it's something that's special about what those individuals were doing as a group is pull up a YouTube video of Zeppelin, or pull up a YouTube video of old Van Halen, live, and turn the sound down and just watch them. That's not choreographed. What Roth did, he was a showman, so he, that part was choreographed. But what I'm saying is, look at the expressions on their face and look at their body language when they're playing. You can't fake that. That's not the music did that. That wasn't them tap dancing. The cool thing about that is the song was 90% of the entity, and the band was that last piece that it had to be them to do that for it to, you can't go to a Van Halen show and not have a good time. It's impossible.
I don't see how you couldn't, even if you were forced to. You're the angry girlfriend or son who's not really into that kind of thing. I think you'd come away with it. And I think where I'm a little disappointed is, unlike other great musicians, I kind of wish they could have kind of had some other giant career, like even more variety shows, or even more even movie scoring, like some of these famous drummers and guitarists ended up doing later on. But they didn't need to. They're just making just gallons of money, and they were set for life. But it was also just one of those, Zeppelin just kind of faded off into, different projects, while Van Halen was just, after a while, it came tumbling down on, we just can't stand each other, as Sammy and
Yeah, and that happens because I was a part of a band that we went. This was before social media now, so that's I talk a lot about that on my podcast, the Productive Not Busy podcast. Is that whole podcast is about taking a formula and either doing life or business, and the formula is the same no matter what. And the formula that we used when we were playing was that you had to have a core group of people all pulling in the same direction with the same vision. Then you had to have a product that people were willing to pay for to consume.
Bingo.
So you had to have a quality product that people were willing to spend their money on, consume it, and then consume it multiple times. So
yes.
The money part was really an interesting dynamic because they made gobs of money, but they also spent gobs of, going on a tour across the United States, which we were, that's no joke. That's millions of dollars being spent. You're basically buying the future.
You right? Totally are buying the future.
You're buying the future.
You've done a future investment.
Mm-hmm. Because now you're putting a product out there that people are consuming and enjoying that can't wait for your next product.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then
you've outdone yourself again and again.
Right. And then what happens is the pressure of that is huge. I watched my dad go through it. He was a studio musician, and he put, there was opportunities with, Steve Miller and all the, and it was a pressure cooker to do it again. So if you think about Zeppelin, you think about Van Halen, since we're using those two examples, that's not a one and done. They consistently over 40 to 50 years, and both of those bands are, if you think about it, you're talking bands that are 45 to 50 years old, that their music is still relevant today.
Oh yeah.
That's a quality product.
Right.
That's a quality product.
Even if you don't like them, you can't deny that, hey,
it's a quality product.
Yeah.
And that's the neat thing about, watching that time frame of music is that, I made the example a while ago of the what was the album I referenced a while ago, Different Kind of Truth. I think A Different Kind of Truth is that they pulled that music out from the late 70s, early 80s and put it out in 2012. And it sold a lot, right?
It really did.
And they were able to tour on it. And, not that people went to see that show for that music. They went knowing that they were going to hear the good stuff, the really good stuff, right? So that's the cool thing about, look at Robert Plant now. Robert Plant still plays Zeppelin songs in his live performances. That's pretty amazing. 50 years later, you're still playing that stuff and people still want to hear it.
Yeah, they can't wait to hear more, even though, time is kind of not on our side right now. But if you just are left with wanting more, then yeah, you've done more than impact.
Right. And another thing, if you think about it, I had this conversation with somebody the other day, is that they said, oh, well, I went and saw Roth in 2018 or whatever, and he was terrible. Well, you know what? You can't put Terry Bradshaw back on the field.
And just one post-fame encounter.
And him be the same as he was when he played in the 70s.
And again, one experience out of a gazillion, This is like, where are we ranking this? But yeah, many will often like to just do one encounter. It's kind of like with fan conventions. It's like, okay, you had one unpleasant encounter with a celebrity, but you can't put their talent, and just wash it aside just like that. And given how you've been on,
you were there for a reason.
Exactly. And given how you've done some touring and opened up with various bands, I had a family friend who, Donnie Watson, who was a palist, Stevie Ray Vaughan and his brother, and he was often helping out like as a backup
Yeah.
crew member. Do you think a lot of people could just owe it to just kind of not only just going to live shows, but just kind of touring with a band, just whether you're just a photographer or, set dresser or whatever,
Oh, absolutely.
see how the whole business
I mean,
works?
absolutely. I mean, if you want to watch a great movie that puts it, and it's absolutely probably one of the most real movies that I've ever seen that depicts what it was actually like, because I was blessed enough to experience, is watched Almost Famous.
Oh yeah.
Almost Famous is about the Rolling Stone kid that went on the road with the band, and it shows exactly how dysfunctional it can be, because when you listen to Unchained or you listen to I'm a Woman, any of that stuff, you listen to the Immigrant Song, When the Levee Breaks, that was a millisecond in time. Think about it. That was in their case, probably 10 hours of recording that song, 10 hours of blip in time in the last 50 years that they put that on vinyl. Okay. That doesn't really depict, I mean, that song is the product, but the ingredients it took to put that, the players, the engineers, the studio, the ambiance, everything is, it bends a little bit. And then you see these people, they were dysfunctional, right? But because you're dysfunctional doesn't mean that it took all of them to make that music, in other words. So them individually they couldn't have pulled it off, but as a group they pulled it off magically, and it took all their dysfunction together to do it. Because
I'm the same way with film.
Ross was a mess.
Sorry, go ahead. But
go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm the exact same way with film. I get very annoyed when I see a critical or user review. Just they want to blame like the first name that they see on the product, the actor or the director. I'm like, it's a team effort. There's more to it than that. Was the cinematographer doing their job? Was the producer, interfering with the production and the tone of, the various business meetings, did an investor pull out? And so the production was compromised and looked cheap because they couldn't afford whatever.
We'll return after these messages.
Do you ever find yourself thinking about who would win in a fight between Goku and Superman? Hi, I'm James Gavsey, and on the Who Would Win show, me and my co-host Ray ignore anything important happening in the outside world and debate fictional battles between characters from comics, movies, and video games.
We got a new show every week, and almost always am I the winner.
Yeah, not true, Ray.
In the past, we've discussed such matches as Captain America versus Darth Vader, Solid Snake versus the Iron Giant, classic matchups like RoboCop versus Terminator, and even the Muppets versus Sesame Street.
That one was crazy. So if you're a fan of geek culture and love a spirited debate, check out the Who Would Win show wherever you get your podcasts, or check us out at whowouldwinshow.com.
We let things pile up in the DVR, we add them to our queues, we wait for the DVDs and Blu-rays. We time shift. The Time Shifters Podcast. Sci-fi, horror, fantasy, superheroes, comedy, action, film, television, maybe some not-so-current events. Find us on iTunes or at timeshifterspodcast.com.
Cool thing about Blind Knowledge is we are in multiple countries. We are worldwide all across the globe. We are in the US, we are in the UK, we are in Canada, Germany, India, Japan. We're in Australia, y'all. BlindKnowledge.com. Now back to the feature presentation.
Dragon Ball Z, One Piece, Naruto, all things that we love, all manga that were originally published in the legendary magazine Weekly Shonen Jump.
But not every series can run for 300 chapters and have a hit anime. This is David.
This is Jordan.
We're the hosts of Shonen Flop. Each episode, we look at manga that ran in Jump that didn't quite make it.
We discuss what it did wrong, what it did right, how the series could have turned itself around, and ultimately, was it a flop or not?
We're on all your favorite podcast apps, and you can find us at shonenflop.com.
Keep on flopping, floppers.
And unfortunately, many just want, it's kind of like with politics. Everyone wants to do an instant blame game, and it's like, well, there's so many more factors to this,
Oh, absolutely. And that's something that, it's probably a blessing that people didn't get to see that.
Yeah, it would have been way more harsher back then.
Yeah, right. I mean, it'd be, because here's the thing. It's just like social media. I'm a coach and trainer and keynote speaker, and I have the podcast, and I've done radio stuff in the past. I've done some TV stuff as far as like commercials and stuff like that. And it's funny that there's so much bullshit out there, right?
Yeah.
There's so many people out there, like in the coaching and training business right now, right? You got a 23-year-old kid sitting on a Lamborghini telling you how you're going to become a millionaire and this and that. It's all bullshit. What you see isn't necessarily what's real. And, you've got people, on social media that they're, Christ followers and, happy father of 3 and a beautiful wife and all this stuff. And they're alcoholic, narcissistic folks in real life, and nobody knows it, right? Music is the same way. That's a blip in time. It's a blip in time that they're creating something that is magical, and you can't take that away. But it doesn't mean that, I think some people would be very disappointed on how, I saw some debauchery when I was on the road. Some stuff that you would blow your mind on how people acted and how people treated people and how people really were, but then how they were depicted in the press. Right. It's pretty interesting to see that. And I got to see it firsthand. And I think it's almost a blessing that the average music listener doesn't get to see that stuff. Right. Look at Jimi Hendrix. People were just in awe of Jimi Hendrix. He was a mess.
Yeah.
That's why he died at 27. So what you're getting is just a blip, and that, I think that's what people need to appreciate, is appreciate the blip in time that we got those nuggets that gave us inspiration, gave us emotion, gave us a product that we can consume when we're down, when we're happy, when we're, whatever it is that we need it for. That's a pretty cool thing.
I again could not say it better myself. This is why you're a great speaker, and I'm not. you're because I for instance, I do security. There's so many things when people ask me what did you see at the job? It's like, I don't want to tell you. It would be, some people can handle it. I just brush it off because I'm kind of used to the world kind of being harsh, and I just filter it out. Other people, they can't filter that out. They come instantly home and they can't stop talking about it, and then it drives other people insane. So I'm just like, just some people just can't handle certain things. And it's just like, I know others joke about don't get too close to your icons. In some cases, it's just like, if you really want to know, you can do some digging. You can ask a few people whose whole job is basically being a biography, journalist. But like you say, and I'm glad that you brought up some of the music docudramas. I think The Commitments is another one that talks about an English band. I think that does a great job of showing how everyone's just kind of making all these easily avoidable mistakes. And, that movie works so well because they actually got some actors who had some musical backgrounds. So it's kind of very meta in a way, but
absolutely.
it totally hits on a lot of the same things that Almost Famous talked about, where it's like you get so caught up in the fact that you are working with your icons that you ultimately kind of forget after a while, what your purpose is or why you're doing this in the first place. And if you're mixing that in with other just crazy elements, drugs, sex, whatever, then
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point that you made, is that, if you think about it, I've got some pretty influential rock icon type associates still in my life because of my past, and that they're special because of their talent.
Exactly.
But they're still a human being. They still get colds. They still get up and sit up on the side of the bed just like everybody else does. And they have bad days and they have good days. They have chemical imbalances. They have chemical dependencies. They have, wife troubles or husband troubles. They have kid problems. I mean, look at all the famous people that their kids, die. Sylvester Stallone had a son that died, and all of these people that put people up on a pedestal. I get it. I had to adjust. One of the reasons why I had to get out of the music industry is because I had a hard time. I was blessed not to be rowdy, and I was blessed not to be chemically dependent, but I had a real hard time with adjusting, coming back and being an actual human being when I got off the road. You get picked up on a tour bus and you leave and you go out and do amazingly extraordinary things in front of people that adore you. And then you come home off the road and you got to mow the yard and you got to take the trash out and you got to feed the dog and you got to go to the grocery store and you got to do normal people stuff that after a while you do lose the blend in reality on what's real and what's not. Right.
You start crashing, and unfortunately, others like to act like it's instant. It's like, no, it builds up after a while, and many famous people need a caretaker.
Well, and it builds up because here's the thing: nobody prepares you for that.
No.
Nobody prepares. There's not a book that says, okay, you're going to go from playing in stinky cigarette smoke filled bars. And then if you're lucky, you're going to, start playing some C-type venues in Orlando and Tampa and Atlanta and Birmingham and New York City. We were on a tour called the Oranges to Apples tour, which Oranges is Florida, Apples is New York, right? And it was all up and down the East Coast. And we went on that tour junket there, the Oranges to Apples tour, and we would be, our niche was that we were ready in an instant. So if, let's say, somebody came into town and their opening band couldn't play, the singer got sick or something happened, we could get plugged in right then. Well, that got us a name to where, then people said, hey, come with us, and snapped us up, and we would go on these magical carpet rides with people. But nobody prepares you for that, because here's the thing. The music industry, it's not being a garage band. It's not being a party band. It turns into a corporate thing that now you've got people telling you where to be, when to be, how to be, what you can say, what you can't say, what you should wear, what you shouldn't wear. You've got 103 temperature. I'm sorry for your luck, but you've got to play Hershey, Pennsylvania tonight in front of 18,000 people. You got to do it.
Right. You're sick. You got to do it whether you like it or not. And right. And so that the chemical dependency stuff I got to see firsthand was people's way of coping with it. So Zeppelin and Van Halen went through it, right? They had access to everything. So when you have access to everything, you're going to do everything, and so it's one of those things. I was lucky that, I take a Benadryl and I sleep for 2 days. So I was never chemically dependent because I couldn't do it, but which was a blessing because I remember everything. I remember every moment of every amazing, little, what do you call it? Milestone that we hit, because I can remember it because I wasn't chemically dependent.
which gave me the opportunity to see, we were treated like crap by the band we were opening for. But I know why we were treated like crap, because they were whacked out of their brains. They weren't normal people, right? And that's why it's kind of cool to see bands now that are really talented that, I come from the days like, Guns N' Roses, right? We shared a bill with Guns N' Roses before they were signed. They were awful. They were absolutely atrocious because they were just falling down on whatever they were on. I mean, it was awful. Now to see them, it's amazing because they truly were talented and they're amazing musicians. And now they're getting to reboot and being able to do stuff that they can remember. And I think as fans, I think that's more what this show's about, and I get it. But the insight of being a fan is we are all blessed. Take my past out of it. I'm a blessed human being to live in the same time frame that allowed me to consume Led Zeppelin, Van Halen, right? All those, just like people that were blessed to consume the Beatles and all those, the Rolling Stones back when they started, right? That's a blessing. That's a blessing that we are able to have that, and we're able to keep it. Because guess what? 100 years from now, when we're all dust, Van Halen songs are still going to be there. Led Zeppelin songs are still going to be there for people.
Immortalized, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like you say, you get to see the evolution process, and that, as a fan, kind of empowers you more to just kind of see the, what's a great day, what's an off day for any kind of talent, and how they handle stressful situations, contrary to how typical people might handle it. And again, there's no easy answer really either, because again, no one goes to college saying, hey, here's how you get it to be a kick-ass rock star. It's like, and it's not a deal. So you can learn how to play certain instruments, but
sure. Well, and think about it in this context, right? Is we have a product. We do the same thing. I mean, my podcast, I've got 155 episodes, started 2 years ago, and it was, my way of contributing to people, because I've got 30 years worth of experience in building businesses, which creates quality of life for people. Why would you sit on that talent, right? Why would you sit on that and not share it with the world? Why would you sit on your knowledge of the music?
I was glad to get you on here, because from a
fan standpoint.
I try to interview all kinds of inspiring talent as well, and in the hopes that they can share little tidbits with others. And I'm glad that
absolutely.
you're able to do a lot of these public speaking events, because like you say, you might as well use it while you still have the chance. And it's very hard to do when, you kind of discover it later in life. It's like, hey, I got this, calling, and, it's not like you figure that out right away either. And just like these bands, is like, I'm sure they didn't figure out overnight, hey, I'm going to be doing this the rest of my life. They kind of just grew into it. Just went from there.
They did what they loved. And see, that's the key to that. That was not fake. None of that was fake. They took what they loved and they turned it into something that they were able to monetize. That's why we do podcasts. That's why we do, what we do. And here's the thing for me, I operate from that standpoint is I want to help people do life or business, whatever they choose, whatever they happen to choose as their deal is. I want you to do it confident, focused, and with a plan. Because when you do that, you are able to do magical things, because every human being has something to offer. So if you were hooked on meth for 10 years and now you're clean, you have something to offer the people that are currently going through what you went through, right? Because now they have a beacon of light to follow on, okay, here's how you do it. Here's the formula of how I did it. Maybe it can help you too, right? So why would you sit on that? And
1,000%.
And talking about music, right? And talking about music, talking about sports, talking about what I do, which is, building businesses and having a good quality of life by just basic principles, is that's where the magic happens, because everybody has somebody out there that can use what they have to offer, no matter what it is. I mean, I talked to a guy the other day that, I help people start podcasts, because I started mine, but the whole goal for my show was to start a podcast with no money. Like, I've got money, I've got plenty of money, but I wanted to show people that you could start it. So I started it on my cell phone with a free, app and my Beats headphones, and I started putting product together for people for free. And it worked. And now we're in 44 countries. We got 30 plus thousand subscribers, and it was all done with no money, because the quality, the product is your dreams, your aspirations, your experiences, right? If everybody would start operating out of dreams and imagination instead of the past experiences, it would be amazing. Because you can literally, like on here, you can start a podcast and be anybody you want to be, as long as you have the knowledge to put out there that you really did something. Then people will listen to it. I think that's why the internet influencing gurus out there are come and goers. They're there one day and gone the next, because there's no content there. They're taking somebody else's content and regurgitating it. And so, that's the cool thing about this platform. And I would much rather do, Twitter Spaces and do my podcast and interview somebody than to stand in front of a group of people and read out of a book. That's a quick way to lose me. Take me to a training session where somebody's reading something out of a book. That's not for me. That's why my speaking business has turned out pretty good, because I have a niche, right? I'm the guy that I go around and I present myself as, well, I have a skill and here's my product, but here's why. This is how you can use me. If you're having an event and you have a keynote speaker that doesn't show up, call me. I can do it in 15 minutes. I can get up in front of a group of people and talk to anybody and bring value with no preparation, because I've got a bank of experience that I can fall back on.
Yeah.
Right. And every one of the keynotes that I go to, that I speak at, I start every one of them exactly the same way. I carry no notes. I carry no books. I carry no nothing with me. Every one of them starts out with, hey, have you ever got up, right, on any given day and said, man, I wish I had more money, or I wish I had more free time, or I wish I had less stress, right? I don't care if you got 10 people in front of you or 1,000 people in front of you. Every single solitary person that woke up at some time in their life and said one of those three things.
Yeah, they're all various elements that are very key, even if they don't know how to word it that way. That they're all thinking some degree of that. And
right.
But since you're so good at adapting to this, and you lived all kinds of those experiences, you're good at adapting to this, because like you say, so many other people can relate to those. And have you thought of even doing a TED Talk?
Absolutely.
By chance?
Well, that's something that we're exploring. I've got multiple businesses, right? So I've got the podcast. I own a real estate team. I own some outside businesses that are around that real estate. And then I also run a coaching, training, and speaking company. So I run 3 businesses simultaneously, which is easy, and because I work 3 or 4 days a week on all of them. Because I teach people, I teach time management, I teach, team building, I teach overcoming obstacles and turning obstacles into opportunities, because, it's just like anything else. Music is the same thing, right? I always say that, money follows problem solved. Mm-hmm. The bigger the problem, the bigger the paycheck. So if you think about that from what we were talking about, our main subject that we should be talking about is the music, is that if I'm a musician, people want to have a good time. They want to feel good. That's the problem. So if you can solve that problem and get it to the masses and it resonates with enough people, there you go. You're going to be rich and famous because you have a product that solves somebody's problem.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a cool thing. And everybody has that. I don't care if you're starting a lemonade stand or you collect football and baseball cards, or you go to garage sales and flip stuff, or you start an online business. It's all exactly the same. There's no difference. Even if let's say you're a single guy and you want to date somebody, you've got to have an explanation of services and a value statement to offer the other person that you're talking to. This is who I am. This is who I am. This is what I do.
This is my persona.
This is why you should do it with me. Right. And you can't fake that, right? So if you get on Tinder or if you get in one of these speed dating rooms and there's an absolutely gorgeous, beautiful woman sitting across the room and you're like, oh, she's the one. And then you sit down in front of her and her breath stinks. She ain't the one, right? Because she didn't, right? Her product is not good.
Yeah.
So, and as that was kind of a corny analogy, but it's true. The founding principles are exactly the same. You need to have an elevator pitch. Let's say you get on an elevator with the absolute most beautiful woman you've ever seen in your life. You better be able to have a 2-minute elevator pitch on why she should go out with you, right? And your business is the same way.
Yeah, many even struggle with even 1 minute of an elevator pitch, and it's just on the fly. If spill your guts.
And why I bring that up is that back in the day when we were trying to get signed to a record label, there was no YouTube, there was no Facebook, there was no Twitter.
No way to know how to pick someone's brain and how to talk to a certain exec.
Well, that not only that is we walked around with our cassettes or our CD with a printed out 8x10 color photo and our bio. And we would go into these radio stations and record companies and go, hey, this is who we are. This is what we do. And this is why you should sign us. And we did that. And I built every business. I owned, car dealerships. I had Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram dealerships. That was the same exact formula, right? They can go buy a car like this anywhere they want. If they're in front of me, hey, this is who we are. This is what we do. And this is why you should do it with us. Right? Every single solitary thing that we do in our life is like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the cool thing about stuff like this is that you're getting real experiences in the raw, like two dudes just having a conversation that now you can share with millions of people. And there's going to be a large percentage of people out there that resonate with what we're talking about.
I definitely hope so. And this just felt just so empowering too, because, I'm talking from basically a third party. You're talking from up close and personal. And at the same time, to have this kind of an understanding, it also takes a lot of years. Like I couldn't have done this back in junior high.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't have had any maturity, any organization. I would have had a bunch of and I would have been boring.
Right.
And you're also, helping configure, hopefully for many people listening, that again, to make every pitch stand out is very difficult. To make to offer any kind of business, is very hard. And the 70s were also very rough, and just so many people got screwed over by record companies that weren't were
right
that weren't being honest and had legal troubles.
Absolutely. Well, and absolutely, you hit the nail right on the head. Just think about it. You're talking about Led Zeppelin and Van Halen, which happened in the late 60s and all of the 70s is when it happened for them. Just think of that. Think of the mountain they had to climb with no internet, no Facebook, no YouTube, no Twitter. It was the only way they could get the word out. And the beginning was to play in front of people. They played in front of 10 people. They would play in a backyard party. And then those people would go, hey, tell a friend, we're going to be here next Friday night. Bring a friend with you. Now they're playing for 20 people. Hey, when you guys leave, you really like this? Yeah, it was awesome. Great. We're going to be here next Friday night. Bring a friend. Now you got 30 people, right? And that's how that worked. And so the basic principles of, and you mentioned them a while ago, a teenager. That's one of my visions is to teach people, a 13-year-old kid that's going through life and kind of going through kid stuff there's a lot to offer. If you could get a kid and help them figure out how to communicate, because basically what we do, there's 3 principles that you have to have in order to be successful at doing this basic platform, which is their soft skills, right? In this case, not eye contact because we're not on video, but eye contact, voice inflection, and body language, right? And
Bingo.
Right now, I have facial expressions, even though I can't see you. And that's an art that if you can teach people early on, everybody, a 16-year-old kid that is learning how to play guitar, which now they have the blessing of YouTube because now they can watch it, right? I used to have to learn songs by like putting it on a vinyl record and backing it up every 2 seconds on every note, right? Because we didn't have YouTube.
We didn't have a CD or a Walkman.
We didn't have right. So the excuses that people use now for not doing something is pretty fucking pathetic. Sorry for the language.
No, it's fine. But it's the same thing with fitness and health.
You're right. You have every asset at the palm of your hands right now to do absolutely anything that you want, because there's so much access and information that people are putting out there. Now, what the problem today is that you've got to decipher whether or not it's bullshit.
Exactly.
Right? That guy that's telling me what to do, is he done it or is he reading it out of a book? Right. I have a big problem with that. That, you don't have to be old and gray to have good quality content. You just
don't have to be a certain age.
Right.
You don't have to be a certain elite or aspect. But I had Holly Cottonon, who was a fitness gal, and she noted that you also got if you're doing fitness in general, you have you mentioned earlier with books and real estate and insurance that was like kind of taking from other books. Many health and food people have gone into lawsuits because they literally copied one another person's text and added their 2 cents.
And that's the beauty and that's the difference. You see, unfortunately, it's like being a musician, right? The average person that's listening to music that's not a musician has no idea how hard it is to write a good song.
No. They're just listening to the noise half the time.
Right. Or how hard it is to actually make it sound good once you've got it written. Because all 4 or 5 parts in that band have to be spot on. There can't be any mistakes, right? So the pressure that it takes to do that is incredible. So going back to your point, people getting in lawsuits. Well, that's exactly the reason that you've got to be careful on what you consume, because when I tell you to do something, or if I explain lead generation, or if I explain mindset, like how to have a good mindset, I practice that every day. I know it works. That's why I'm sharing it with you. I'm not reading it out of a book, right? So,
Bingo.
That's an important aspect of everything in life, whether it's music, whether it's podcasting, whether it's being a good human being and being a good friend, right? A good friend is not somebody that nods their head when you're talking to them about your problems. They pull up a chair and pour a cup of coffee and go, okay, tell me about what you're going through, right?
And repeat what I just said.
All right. And a lot of people are listening. A lot of people listen to respond, not to learn. Right? They're waiting for their turn to talk instead of consuming what you're saying and learning something from it, so that they can come up with a formula. Maybe, you know what? I know exactly what you're going through, dude. I went through that a couple of years ago, and here's what I did. I hope that helps. Right? That's the meaning of being a good human being. Yeah. And you know what? And everybody has a message. Single mom that had an abusive husband, she has experience that may help somebody that's going through what she's going through, right? I don't dabble in that because I don't know what that's like. My parents were married 15 years before they both died. I came from a stable background, so I can't talk to you about what it's like to be, a kid of divorced parents, right? But what I can do is tell you about all the stuff that I am an expert in and that I have done, and all my triumphs and my failures, because failures are more important than successes. Because if you don't have a failure, you didn't try.
That's so true. We are kind of the whole, we like to villainize people, act like they didn't try, and then we like to be invincible and not talk enough about, how you got there. How many times did it take? Were you the equivalent of a dog that kept running into the electric fence before they learned you can't climb up this fence without getting zapped? It is a very stressful scenario, and so many people like to sugarcoat it. And it's like, again, these bands did not happen overnight, but that goes with any success story. And
they were businesses. That's the key to it, that people,
they were a brand.
Forget. Led Zeppelin was a brand. Led Zeppelin was a brand like Pepsi and Coke, right? Van Halen was a brand. They had ingredients. They had product. They had processes and procedures that they had to follow, right? They didn't all get up there and just start jamming. They all got up there and played what they put together, like what they manufactured on the album. They had to recreate night after night. And, it's, and for me, it's kind of like this, talking about bands. So, it's an interesting dynamic because musicians also get to the point, and Robert Plant does it now. I'm not a big fan of it. Van Halen, they never did it, which I really applauded them for. But don't go do a live concert and play a classic song and rearrange it because you're tired of playing it the old way.
I've heard vaguely that, he did some of that. Yeah.
Because, and Bon Jovi does that now. Bon Jovi plays an interpretation of his classic songs. I don't want to hear an interpretation. I want to hear the classic song.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's the thing about being a brand is like, Coke did it. Coke had new Coke. Well, I don't want new Coke. I want the old Coke. Right.
Unhealthy or not, you want the classic that put you on the map. Yeah.
Right. And when and like when you hear bands now do their songs and they do a different arrangement of an old classic. Well, I don't want to hear a new arrangement of an old classic. I want to hear the old classic.
I can understand mixing two songs together, but that's so different than, again, just taking a shortcut.
Because but if you take a song and completely rearrange it, and the words are the same, but the music doesn't sound anything like the old one because you're tired of playing it the old way, I'm not a big fan of that.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely half-assing it, and after a while, it's like you'd be better off just saying, we're not going to play that tonight.
Yep. You can listen to that one on the CD deck on the way home. Right. So anyway, well, I hope that was helpful. I enjoyed it.
I'm glad you were able to join us here. And once again, so we can find Productive Not Busy podcast on Twitter. What other formats is it on for those who want to listen?
Okay, so we are on, I think, 11 different platforms. So you can find on iTunes, Audible, Spotify, Anchor, CastBox, Google Podcast, anywhere, iHeartRadio, anywhere that you can find podcasts, you can find the Productive Not Busy podcast. And all we're out there doing is, trying to make people better, giving them, letting them do life and business with a plan, confident, focused, so you can make more money, have more free time, and less stress, right? And that it works for everybody. It's not strictly a business podcast, but it's basic business principles that you can build your life on, because life is a business, right? Mm-hmm. You got to generate revenue to survive in this world, especially nowadays with the way inflation is. So, anything that you can do to have the right mindset or have the right tools to, I do stuff on teaching people how to talk and how to present and have a value statement and an explanation of services that they don't have. It's not complicated. It's not hard. Everybody has one. And if you perfect that, and you'll find that you have a lot to offer people and they'll be interested in listening to it if you can put that in a form that they can understand. Right. So
Yeah.
I appreciate the time, and I'd love to be on again sometime. If you ever need somebody, just give me a shout. I'll be glad to help you out.
I would be glad to. Let's pick each other's brain. Let's see. Let's even talk about a very big
club. Yeah, we'll do a collaboration. I'll have you on my show, and we'll do it again.
Send the assignment. I will study.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you for being on here, my dude.
Be safe.
All right.
Yeah.
Be careful out there, Wayne.
Take care. Yes, sir. Bye.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening. It's a jacked up